Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Moods, Minds, and Manifestations podcast, featuring real people, real experiences, and real talk. And I'm your host, Mocha. So let's get into it. So my guest today is Ganga. Ganga is my aunt, and many years ago she lost her son in a very tragic way, and I've always admired how she dealt with it because she's a very spiritual person, and I feel sharing her story would be helpful to others out there who have lost children in a very tragic way. So Ganga, welcome.
Hi.
So let's go back to the time when this happened.
Okay. Some background to this is that before I actually met him, initially the dad had been living in the States. He had been involved with drugs with his cousin because apparently his cousin was a drug dealer in New York. And he got caught up in using of drugs. And they put him in an institution. He called it the madhouse, but I don't think it was actually an asylum like that. I don't know much of that.
Could it have been like a rehab or something?
That's what I think it was, but he called it the madhouse. Anyway, that's how he actually started doing yoga, because that's what our yoga organization does. They'll go into prisons and all these different places to promote yoga and meditation as a form of rehabilitation. And that's how he originally got involved in the organization.
So when you met him, was he a guru?
No. He was not guru. His name happened to have the word guru in it. But we get spiritual names in our yogic group. They'll give us spiritual names. And that was just part of the name he got. But he was just another member like myself.
Okay.
But when I met him, he had reformed himself and had come back to Jamaica, and he was living in the ashram. That's how I met him, because I came to the ashram to do yoga. Started off doing yoga classes before it became an initiate and became a part of the organization.
Right, so you met under spiritual circumstances.
Which was many years later
After
from him living there and all that.
Right, so you met many years later in Jamaica, and then from there you went to the States, and then you had Deva, and your whole lifestyle was yogic.
Yes, yogic, vegetarianism, meditation, a very tantric yogic, because unfortunately people believe Tantra is about sex, but that's not what it is. Tantra really embraces the 8 branches of yoga, because you have different types of yoga. Tantric yoga is the one where you incorporate all 8. You have some yogic groups that are just Raja yoga, Hatha yoga, like that. But Tantric yoga embraces all 8. So our yogic practice is like that. And now my yogic life included every aspect of the 8 branches. So my entire lifestyle was about that, the type of food you eat, doing meditation twice a day and all that. And that's what my son was born into.
Right. How long would you say that yogic family unit was intact?
Okay, we were definitely totally, fully all under the same roof until my son was about 10. It's just a matter of what was happening in the economy in the US. That's what forced the issue for me to go to Jamaica. First of all, for my friend to set up a branch of his office in Jamaica, because there was not much architectural work being generated in the US at the time. This would have been around 1991, because by then my son was 10, 11. So in order to get him into the school system here, we had to leave, at that time when he would start secondary level of education.
Right.
So then we were traveling back and forth. Both the father and I were traveling back and forth. The father would come down, and when we had school holidays, my son and I would come up to the States, like summer holidays where you're going to be 2 months. And I was, at that time, I would work in the office in the States, and Otherwise, when that was done, I would come back to Jamaica. So it was at the time now when my son would be getting ready for college. He was in Jamaica with me and he did the SAT and got into a college in the States. And so that's why he came back up to the father. But it turns out that the office was getting ready to shut down in Jamaica anyway. And at that point, I came up for his first semester in college now.
I think it was Miami-Dade Community College, I remember. Yeah.
Right.
Music program.
Yeah. Yeah, he wanted to be a sound engineer. And he had really great teachers. I mean, some well-known musicians were the teachers there.
Yeah. So at what point or what was a catalyst for it to be completely where you're not with the dad anymore?
Once you get together, we have the expression, see me and live with me. It's two different things. Because of the circumstances on how his dad and I met, you figure because you are on this spiritual journey together, you figure, okay, you can work with it and you will be able to make a good go of it. Unfortunately, personalities are different. And although I do remember in the beginning when we got together having discussions about, well, what do you want for the future and stuff like that. And we seem to be on the same track. The problem is that he was actually about 9 years older than me. And I saw that also with another friend's relationship where the man is 9 years older than the woman. And they have already lived a certain portion of life. And the poor woman is trying to now settle in with dealing with this man. And in reality, we were just so different from different backgrounds per se. And I had more education, really. And I had a different focus on how I should live my life and how our son should be raised, in the sense of how you have to deal with the world when you are now on your own. So anyway, men don't seem to put that much emphasis on it unless it's a guy who is really like the CEO of a company or something where you are so focused on whatever. Men tend to be linear, and we as women have to be more rounded. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I would say, and you probably would agree because you were part of our family, that most of the so-called child rearing was my responsibility, actually. I put more effort into it, and the idea of being with the father was really so that the boy would be balanced. I think children should have both parents, with even if it can't be forever in the relationship, within a certain time frame of their life, they should have both parents, because a boy has to know how to be a boy, and he also has to know to be compassionate and affectionate and soft and whatever. He has to be able to
balance
those aspects of being human that a woman will probably stimulate, So it was important. So by the time we were going to be separated, when he became that preteen age, he had enough, I think, of both parents, so that in that he could tell what each of our personalities were and what each parent brought to his life.
Right.
So, so the catalyst really would have been that very early on in our relationship together, I realized that, and maybe also he realized with my personality, I realized that, okay, we are together and we are only going to stay together till this child reaches adulthood, which would be 18, where he's now considered adult and can go out on his own. I knew that we would only be together up to that point. And once my son left home, I would also be out of the relationship. That was one of the reasons why I never actually married his father, because I saw woman becomes chattel in a marriage, and I am just too individual. I am who I am on my spiritual journey, which life is really a spiritual journey for me, having a human experience. I could not be contained, and I would not be restrained by what society determines is a woman's role. So although he had asked me to marry him, I refused. And later on, in later years, it came up again. And I pointed out to him that regardless of what was happening with us, we were still together. And we had family members and friends who were divorced because whatever it is that they saw marriage as, they, when it got to a certain point, they decided, okay, I've had enough of this, and they stepped off. But we, who were never legally married, were still sticking together and trying to make it work, whatever it is we thought our union was about.
Right.
But you asked about the catalyst, and the catalyst was that I realized this person really did not love me, didn't care for me as a person. I don't know, what I represented to him, but it was, the relationship was one where he never even gave gifts. Your birthday comes and you don't get a gift, or let's say for Christmas. And the one time I actually gave him a Christmas gift, it was a shirt that I thought was really nice. I bought him a shirt. And he looked at it when he got it and said, don't do this again, because only his mother can buy him clothes, because his mother lived in England. And, that's another story, another drama of why he was the way he was. Right. When he told me that, I realized, okay, you don't want anything from me, which will probably explain why you didn't give me anything and you are not giving me any gifts. The only gift he ever gave me was an album. when we were just courting, I suppose. And I realized the reason why he gave me the album, the LP, was because I had a player and he liked this particular artist, and he could listen to it when he came to visit.
Okay, so there were ulterior motives. To me, it sounds like much of the relationship wasn't a very, what you would call a traditional loving relationship. I guess at some point you realized it was more about your son and staying together for his benefit rather than for your relationship.
Yes, I can only give you my side of it. That was my side of it, knowing that once he left home, the relationship with the father would be over. The close relationship, because you're not going to see somebody on the street and you still share this child, so you have to be in the person's life still, and vice versa. But I knew that I would step away and go, have my life.
Right, your own path.
Yeah, I would say that the relationship with him, I don't know whether it's typical or not, but for instance, as far as I know, I was the only person that he ever had a child with. And I think because he finally had something that he could hold up to his family, because he was the eldest son in his family of 4 siblings, right? That legitimized him, the fact that he had a son, and our son was really a good kid and, a beautiful child. And so that was the only thing. And I suppose he felt, because his family kept pushing him, why you don't get married? Why don't you get married? And he would have done it, I suppose, because they keep pushing it. But it wasn't something that he wanted, and there was no love lost between us, per se, once we got together. I mean, personally, when I first met him, I wasn't in love with this guy, but because he was on the same spiritual trajectory that I thought we were, I felt, you're going to make a life with somebody, you're going to...
Or at least see where it went.
Yeah, but I knew that once I got into it, and if a child came into it, then I would be going the full distance till the child left. So I know that I was committing at least 18 years to this relationship.
Okay.
We knew each other like 2 years before the pregnancy came about. So, was, in general, we had about 22 years together.
Wow.
As a couple. But the first 2 years, we were feeling each other out, we were dating and all of that. Then we got together for 10 years. So that was 12 full years. And then the last time of leading up to Deva's demise was, back and forth to the US, and then it was over.
So my other question is, do you feel that his spiritual practices were genuine? Did it start off genuine and then it wasn't genuine after that?
Because this entire life is a spiritual journey, whether people are aware of it or not. The spiritual essence of who you are is always on and running in the background. When you are, as you live your daily routine, you focus more consciously. Your mind is focused more consciously on the task at hand. You're putting on your shoes, you're brushing your teeth, or you have to go do something. So you're going to leave your house, you prepare yourself to leave. You're focused on the task at hand. But in actuality, your spiritual essence is running in the background.
So let's go back to the time when this happened. And if I recall, it was a very stormy night, a very windy, rainy storm had approached Florida, and I believe you had been trying to locate your son, who at the time was living with his dad. So take it from here and I'll interject.
So previous to this is that particular day, early morning, I had a dream that was really very dark and ugly. But, when you wake up, the dream was still with me. But, you kind of wake up and you're kind of trying to brush it away because it didn't make any sense.
Do you recall the dream? If you care to share it.
Yes, I do. It was like beyond a dream per se. But I knew I was in bed sleeping, so you call it a dream. But in actuality, it was as if I was in a space, and it was like a totally dark space where, I don't know if you can imagine that you're in a space that's dark with shadows. Everything is like shadowy, but it is really totally dark. It would be like a dark fog. And because there is movement in there, the movement actually would be just like shadowy figures or shadowy beings. And it seemed to be very tumultuous, like there was a fight going on. And I knew I was in that space and I knew my son was there, but I couldn't figure out who are the other beings or entities or whatever that were there that was creating the movement. And I kept trying to make contact with my son, calling his name and trying to hold on to him. And it's as if I was not being successful. And the darkness was really overpowering. I wasn't actually afraid, but imagine you happen to be embroiled in a fight that's going on. You are not one of the participants, but you are there while it's going on. And imagine the emotions that are arising in you. And when you decide that you want to try and help the person, that's when I woke up. It's like I could not become involved in this to enact some kind of rescue or something. So that's when I woke up and the fog, everything disappeared. But it was a really
ominous,
depressing
and ominous.
It was a depressing dream, and I had that going through the day. But then I was involved with helping my aunt with my uncle, and we actually ended up having to take him to the hospital. And that's why by the time we got back on all of that and they got in touch with me, it was just the two of us at her home, she and I.
I remember I was in touch with you maybe one or two times throughout the day, because I remember you telling me on the phone that you had heard from the police, and I specifically said to you it was getting late at night, and I remember saying to you, if it's something bad, please don't call me until in the morning. And I felt bad saying it, but I knew myself, I wasn't...
Feel like something good, yeah.
I didn't know what to think, but it was more, I didn't want to have to process anything bad in that moment. It's like, if it's anything bad, I wanted to delay it.
I understand that from both sides, because Therese didn't call me herself until a little while after to tell me that they were looking for me. You understand?
Right.
So she herself, when she got the call, must have felt it might not be a good thing and whatever. And also on the other side of it, I am similar in that way, in that, after a certain time of day, there is absolutely nothing you can do about things, business places are closed, things like that. So I actually apply that myself. That's why I turn my phone off. Because if something happens, it doesn't make any sense somebody calling me at 2, 3 in the morning, because there's absolutely nothing I can do.
I think it was more selfish self-preservation processing, because he was like my younger brother. I spent a lot of time with you guys when I was, in my teens. And so, I felt very connected to him. I just didn't want to have to deal with anything at that moment.
Yes. Well, that's quite understandable, because I have a very, very good friend. He's a lifelong friend. And when he got the message, because then once I found out, I had to reach out to everybody to let them know. And he could not respond for a good 3 months.
Wow.
When he finally reached out to me, he was very apologetic. He was saying that he just didn't know how to handle what emotional state I may have been in. and he also would not be able to be supportive, strong enough to help me, so
Right.
we deal with things in different ways. It's just, and you deal with it in the moment. You
Right.
can't really tell, no, oh, if such and such happened, I would do so and so. Really, when it's something earth shattering, you have to deal with it in the moment. So, I mean, nothing is wrong with self-preservation, because in other ways, because of how you had to help later on in the whole process, self-preservation was important so that you would be able to help when
Right.
your help was needed.
Right.
So nothing is wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah. Like you said, it was a rainy time. I think it was in October, sometime in October. I really haven't I honestly couldn't tell you what date it was unless I looked at the death certificate.
It was Sylvia, a tropical storm, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Okay. All of that I didn't know. I didn't really know that. I just know it's that hurricane season time of year. And um, what had happened was that my aunt, my uncle, my mom's brother, who lived really close, we were in the same community, he also was not well. And so I was spending a lot of time with his wife, helping to take care of him. And then around the time that it happened, I think I'd spent some time with Deva. He was in college in Miami, and he was living with his dad, and then he came to spend a weekend with me. And we, just the two of us, we went out, did the mall thing and all of that. And then a few days after, I was trying to reach him, kept calling, leaving messages on his phone, wasn't hearing back from him, which is how I think the cops actually was able to track me and find me, really. Anyway, so as I said, I was helping Aunt Edwina with what was going on with Uncle Kingsley. And that's where the cops finally found me.
I don't know at what point you reached out to me, but I remember you reached out to his dad's sisters, where sometimes when there's a storm, he would spend time with them if it was like a hurricane or something, because his place was so small and they lived in a home, so it was more stable or sturdy.
To be honest with you, I don't have much memory of that time. Like all of that sort of thing. The only things that are still really profound in my mind is that I was at my aunt, just basic, very poignant things that happened. I was renting space from my friend and living at her home, and the cops apparently were trying to reach me and contacted her, and she called me and gave me, I think, the number to one of the cops. But I do remember that she said they had called her, and she gave them contact for me over at my aunt's house. And then I reached out to them. That's when they came at night.
Okay. What kind of information did they relate to you? Because obviously they didn't want to go into any detail over the phone.
No, it seems the way they do it is they say they have to come and see you personally. They don't give you any information on the phone. He just confirmed whom he was, and then I gave him Aunt Edwina's address. They came there, and when they came, I answered the door, and she and I were there in the living room. I think a neighbor was there as well, but when obviously people come in and they're cops, other people disappear. So it was just she and I left in her home. In her living room, they came in and they explained who they were and what the situation was. I can't even remember words. I just know that when he said to me, I don't even know the words he said, whether he said your son is deceased or whatever. I just got up, walked to her front door. I mean, it was like, no, I mean, it was so unreal, and it didn't really soak in. It doesn't actually make sense that, but and in the moment you are actually processing everything, you realize that would explain why I haven't been able to reach him, and always getting voicemail and you have to leave a message and he just wasn't calling back. So it's like your mind is processing all of that rather than what they have said to you, that he no longer exists.
Right.
So anyway, my aunt was here to comfort me, thankfully.
If you want to share, please share, because of course, the more information that we put out, the better, but it's really up to you. Do you want to tell our listeners exactly what happened to your son?
So what really happened was that the father murdered the son and then killed himself. The cops say that when they found the crime scene, there was cocaine, but there was no cocaine in my son's system. So the father was involved with cocaine, as I tell you, in his earlier youth. And I suspect that he got to a point in his life where he decided he's done with it. But because the boy was in the house with him, he felt that the boy, this, because I think spiritually or whatever delusion he was in, he felt that there is no point to life. And of course, if he's going to end he's going to end the child's own as well, because really there is no point to life. So if he feels that way, there is no point to life for him, then clearly there's no point to life for anybody else. And leading up to this event, he actually was trying to get me to come and spend a weekend with them.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that very, very clearly.
Right. He said, let's go somewhere together as a family. But honestly, I do believe, as I said, I see this life as a spiritual journey for me, having a human experience. So I believe I am guided and protected in a way that maybe other people are not aware of in their lives, although it does apply to them as well. I am tuned in, I would say, to my spiritual essence. And I just knew I was never going to be back together with this man in any way, shape, or form. So I refused. And I guess, I suspect that when he may have chosen the date that he was going to do this, he got himself his cocaine, knowing that he needed that courage, whatever that gives you, or
that white courage or whatever color it is.
Yes, and that's mind altered state in order to do what he needed to do.
Right.
So
I'll add to that. Prior to this all happening, at one point you were visiting me and you invited your son to come and visit at my place, and his dad brought him. And then rather than dropping him off, it was almost as if he was invited. So he was there just lingering, hanging around. It was really uncomfortable because at that point,
yes,
I think you had already told me that the dad had said to you in some conversation that he wanted to unalive himself. And you threatened to tell his son.
He had said to me that he doesn't want to be here anymore. And the only two people he's concerned about leaving is his son and his mother. As it turns out, his mother lived in England, so he had no access to her. But the son was living in the house with him. So had his mother been close by, he probably would have gone over to her house and done what he did, taking her out with them.
Right.
Because it seems that the only thing I can think is that he was in a state of, I would say, delusion, because I don't know how that it was depressed state. It could just be a delusion about life in general. You know how what's going on in the world now, and we're like, what is this madness?
Yeah.
Maybe he just cannot make the link to navigate what is happening, and he just decided he wants out.
I remember when I saw him, I thought he was looking really gaunt, like he had lost a lot of weight. And if I remember correctly, he was on a like fruitarian diet, like really extreme.
Yes. He would go through those situations where he would go like on a 40-day fast, where he only drinks water or certain liquids, some juices to give him some kind of electrolyte energy, and or like you say, an extreme raw food or fruitarian fast, which those things also affect your physiologically. It affects you, and you have to secrete hormones and things to keep you balanced, which maybe some imbalance came about.
It's possible that there was some mental decline,
which is one of the things that concerns me with how yoga is portrayed in the Western world. These fads and things, people buy into them as if this is part of that lifestyle. And thankfully, I'm not in that space, but some people get caught up in it. Another thing is that he left 2 letters, one to his sister, which is the youngest of the siblings, whom he was closest to, She was the more down to earth. And he left a letter for me. Now, when the cops, that's one of the things the cops said to me when they came to my aunt's house, that they explained that the father killed the son and the father left a letter for me.
Just for the sake of our listeners, he shot his son and then turned the weapon on himself.
I presume he shot himself as well. I don't know. He could have just overdosed.
Oh, I thought it was known that he did that, but okay.
I don't know. But I presume that's what he did. He shot the son and then shot himself, I presume. The letter that he left, everybody kept trying to tell me to read the letter. But I didn't see any point in reading the letter because in reality, a letter is a form of communication in some way. And if it's not full communication, if you cannot make a response to it. So there was no point in me reading the letter because I can't respond to the writer of the letter.
And there's nothing he could say to justify his actions anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I have never read the letter. I presume it is in the files that the cops would have of this event. His sister got her letter.
This is how many years now, so it's still unread?
Let me see, 1999 to know, because the incident happened in 99, so
25 years ago.
26. Yeah.
Wow.
So but I mean, I presume that the cops still have it in their possession
as part of evidence.
Right. So anyway,
I guess from here it's just to help our listeners and people out there. One, how you processed everything from then till now, and then also how you would advise other people to process it if they were in the same or similar situation.
Okay. Advice is a little bit strong for me. I would make suggestions. Truthfully, what is important, I think, and I mean, this has been my entire life. I'm now heading to 70 years of age. But my entire life to this point, I have always been mindful of myself, who I am and how I show up in every situation, and maybe I think that is an important part of dealing with anything. It is important for you to understand who you are within any given situation, whether it's a relationship or just preparing a meal or whatever. What do you bring to it, or how do you impact what is happening?
The thought, know thyself, comes to mind.
Yeah. It is important. And I mean, even if for your listeners who may not be in that mindset yet or in that flow, that is where I would say you should start. You are experiencing something, and how does that relate to you, who you are? And then at this point, you would consider, well, who am I really? And what helped me is the fact that because I spoke with another friend afterwards. He was my business partner in Jamaica. He actually came up to America to just hold my hand when he heard about it. He and another friend, a male and a female, we are all friends, and they both came to America just to hold my hand when it happened. And what I found at the time of the event was that other people were totally demolished and devastated, but for some reason, I was very centered. I will admit that I was in shock. I know that I was in shock with regards to every day, going to sleep, getting up, eating, driving, because when I went to the crematorium...
I think I was with you when you went.
No, you went with me when I went to collect I think you were with me when I went to collect the ashes. When I went to make the arrangements, I was totally alone by myself driving my pickup. And I mean, that was another poignant moment. I don't even know. It was like you were on autopilot. I don't remember making the turns, observing the stoplights and all of that. I just remember getting into the vehicle and driving. And the next thing I know, I was on the main road and I would turn left onto the secondary road where the crematorium was. And it's like I came out of the fog briefly while I was on the main road and observed that I'm sitting in a line of traffic at the stop light. There was a red, the light was red and we stopped. I was sitting there and it's like I just briefly came out of the fog and observed that there were two rainbows, because remember, it was a rainy time. There were two rainbows. One was very strong, profound, and like a secondary behind it, which the secondary might have been, I don't know, when you see two rainbows, if the second one, it's never usually as brilliant, and maybe it's just like a reflection of the first one. But I saw two rainbows and it just lifted my spirit. And in that moment, I realized, oh, where I was on the road, and it's time for me to go into the left turn lane. And I put on my indicator, went to left turn. So for a brief moment, I came out of the fog. I got to the crematorium. I spoke with the fellow. Fortunately, I went with a Jewish crematorium because their rule about the 24-hour cremation and those other things ties in with our yogic practices. And I specifically asked him not to commingle the ashes, because his dad's family, because we are in this yogic group together, they thought, okay, because there must be some specific, because he didn't go to church or anything, so they couldn't put him into go to a priest or a preacher to bury him. So they wanted to know what is our yogic practice. So I told them about the cremation. And I also gave them the name of the crematorium I was using. And I told him specifically, there is to be no commingling of the ashes. I just want my son's ashes whole and, sanctified in whichever way. And fortunately, I did that because when I was leaving the crematorium, they were arriving. And that was the first thing they said to me about commingling the ashes. And I said, no, absolutely not. And I have already given instructions. So the man already knew. And I mean, when they came in, I introduced them to him to say, this is the father's people, because I told him the story while I was talking to him, and that's how I mentioned no commingling. Anyway, to get back to what your question, I would say that the first thing a person would have to do is to just shut out the rest of the world and focus on how does this event affect me. What my friends who had come up from Jamaica said to me is that they realized, because I was on this yogic journey, my life had been on such a spiritual trajectory, that I was compos mentis and I could emotionally deal with it because
you see the bigger picture, the bigger picture.
Yes, my approach to dealing with that situation was purely from a philosophical standpoint. We are here, we are actually on a spiritual journey, and everything has to be dealt with. The real meaningful aspects of life have got to be dealt with in that spiritual flow. The fact that these two entities, myself and my son's dad, came together to facilitate the creation of this child and facilitate his spiritual journey is by divine design. And we were who we were as parents in this relationship. We played our role as we were, it was designed to be. And this child at this stage, it was time, the opportunity presented itself for him to leave, and he left. Now, in my processing of all of it, what was very acute to me in the moment was my journey with this child, who this being was. All right, not the child itself, but the spirit, the soul. That was embodied in this child. My journey with this soul is not over. So, there is still a connection, whether you believe in reincarnation and we will somehow meet up again, or if you just believe that because we are both of the same spiritual essence of life, we are still connected.
I'm sure on a human level you find that comforting, that you still have that.
It does, but it depends to the extent, because people will try to comfort you too, and try to say you will see him again. From the Christian aspect of it, they'll say when you get to heaven you'll see him, and then you have other people who will say this too shall pass and things like that. In reality, those things don't necessarily offer any kind of balm to your pain.
Right.
The weathering this storm, at this point I can say is a lifelong. It will go with you till you take your last breath. You just have to find a way to embrace it and deal with it.
And not let it destroy you. And find a balance. I guess it helps tremendously if you're a spiritual person or if you follow spirituality in any way.
Right.
That helps you to balance, yes, that attachment that you had to that, in this case, the child. The entity that's your child.
Yes. In a situation where somebody loses a child to like a long-term illness, it might be easier to find a particular, because once the child is terminally ill, you have started making some kind of adjustment to the stage at which you know this child will no longer be here. For someone where it's an instantaneous thing like an accident, or in this case, an event like this, it is just so sudden that you have got to put yourself in a place where now you have to make that adjustment, come to some kind of understanding between you and your higher belief system. If you believe in God or whatever, you have to figure out, well, why has this happened? Why have you done this? Or why
is this happening? Yeah.
Of all the people in my family, extended family and friends, why is it my child? You understand? Our center stage. So for me, it helps to be philosophical about it. So in whichever way you can now come to some understanding or agreement with your God, what you consider God to be, you need answers. And if you are not a person who believes in God or believes in some higher situation, some greater force, I don't know, however you have been able to live your life and weather the storms of life, that is what you have to look to.
Right. Yeah.
That there has got to be some meaning to all of this and some reason to it. Now, I don't look for any meaning and I don't look for any reason.
You look at it from the more spiritual, philosophical way where even though he was your son, you birthed him and all of that, he was his own soul here to fulfill his own experiences. So if you can compartmentalize it in that way, it helps. It doesn't erase human hurt and all of the pain and all of that, but it helps maybe just to put things into perspective to allow you to deal with it.
Yes. What I have a greater challenge with is, which is why I didn't want to have too much detail about what happened, is that because I had that dream, and I do not know if he was asleep and was just peacefully asleep and got shocked. You understand? And I think that is the hardest thing for any survivor of a tragic event like this, where it's not an accident or, a terminal illness that took its time. The thing is, because you don't know the actual facts, you weren't there, you weren't seeing it play out, your mind, your imagination is really what is so challenging. So whenever the thoughts come up for me about, because you think, was the person suffering pain or whatever, you understand? When those type of thoughts come up, I have to immediately release it and talk to your God or whatever and say, listen, you have to take this away from me because you created the situation and I'm just here trying to live through it. And immediately I try to put my mind in a different place, a more peaceful, restful, calming place. Maybe it will be that you pick up a book, something to distract your mind from the thought that you are having, whatever it is that create that distraction. I find that the more I do that year after year, time after time, the easier it is to get into that space of replacement of the thought. Because thinking about it is not going to undo it, and it's not going to give you any wider knowledge, you understand, or expansion of consciousness. So don't think about that because you don't really know. You are just imagining the worst. So you let that go.
My other thought too is, for you, I would assume that here we are 25, 26 years later, that there have been points throughout these years where your human side has maybe broken down, crying over it. Yeah. Has that happened?
When I feel tears coming, I remember his smile. I think of an instance when we were together and doing something fun or something like that. There was a point at which I would dream of him and I would wake up in such pain. And, I actually got to a point, and maybe this is mind control, I don't know, but I got to a point where I said, listen, I do not want to have any dreams of this person because it's painful for me, meaning my son. I say, I don't want to dream of him. And I found that I'm not dreaming of him as I was. And I try to, in my conscious, wakeful state, if he comes into my mind, I send him love and wish him all the best because, it's a spiritual flow of everything in life. And, just wish joy and happiness for him.
Is it possible, though, that him coming to you in dreams is your way to keep connecting with the soul?
Well, here is the thing. Whereas I, yes, believe that, I don't believe that in a very simplistic way because of the state of consciousness that is at play when you are dreaming and asleep. In other words, your conscious crude mind is what you have put to rest because that's what moves the body and takes care of your bodily functions. And so that crude mind is not there to process it the way we are processing it now, like we are talking. But it's your subconscious mind. And I'm still trying to, understand this more fully. When we are having dreams, if the subconscious mind is at play, I do not want to carry over the experience of the conscious mind into the subconscious, whether state or zone of existence, into that realm. So until I can be fully aware in that subconscious state and appreciate, have a relationship with my son in that state, there is no point in me meeting with him in that state. You understand? And that's
right.
What the dream would be, where based on what you are saying is that we have met up in that other state of being. If when I am with him in that state, all I can think of, oh my God, he's dead, he's no longer around, I won't see him again. I would rather be with him in that realm when we are both aware that we are more than whatever we were in the crude conscious state, and we are having a different type of relationship now.
Right.
Even if it's still gonna be parent and child,
Yeah.
But our relationship has now moved to a different dimension or whatever. Until I am in a state where I cannot fully appreciate that, there is no point.
Right, because then you're, having these battles with your crude conscious mind versus what is really real. I get it. Right. I guess the human side of me just thinks that there may be some meaningful communication that you may be missing out on.
Not maybe. Let's say mundane state where you have a parent and a child, but one of them might as well be dead because there is no relationship between them. They are so far apart. As a parent in that situation, you would maintain the love that you have for your child. And whenever the child is ready to communicate with you, you are open to it. Same as the child. The child retains this love for the parent, but you accept right now we just cannot communicate effectively. So let us maintain our distance.
Right.
So it's the same situation where nothing is to be gained if it's not going to be a loving and harmonious relationship.
Right.
We are not here as humans to be in a hateful state or at war with each other. That's not our purpose on this planet. But if you find that you are in that state, and you will be in that state in some instances, because unless there is a meeting of the minds, when two minds are not in the same place, the differences will be more prevalent than the similarities. And that's why wars and those sort of things happen.
Yeah.
So it's just the soul being able to navigate this crude life in a mindful way.
Right.
And I'm trying to be mindful.
Right. So what suggestion would you give to somebody that's maybe not on your spiritual level?
Yeah. That is the challenge now with this interview, because I realize now, very early on, I knew myself. So like I said, the first place somebody having to deal with something like this is that you have to understand who you are in order to understand what your role in this. You understand? You have to break it down basically to who you are. And that means you have to look at your mind. What are the thoughts that you are entertaining? For instance, I could easily have said, it's a good thing the father killed himself because I would have to go gunning for him. You understand? You have to know now, why are you thinking the way you are? Because your thoughts now will then translate into actions.
In a way, when something profound like this happens, it's time for the person that's affected to take stock of who they are, how the experience affects them, evaluate how they want to be going forward. It's just a moment of reckoning how you proceed.
I think, and maybe this is the cosmic aspect of it, that happens automatically. However, depending on your state of your mind, how you will normally deal with things, you may lay blame. You may take the role of just be blaming other people, situations, life general. You may choose to blame, but I think what you just said automatically happens. It's part of the process that you have to now figure, well, why is this happening to me? If that's just the basic question you are asking, why is this happening to me?
What I was getting at was, rather than look at it as, why is this happening to me? I'm a victim. More, why is this happening to me as a spirit, a soul? And what is the lesson?
Well, you see, the thing of it is, if you are not a spiritually aware person, if you don't normally look to spirituality or religion or whatever, the tendency will be, well, why is this happening to me? Not even why has this happened now? Why has this happened to me? Maybe it's part of our survival mechanism that you and what's happening with you comes first with everything. Even though when a parent puts their child first, or you put your parents or your grandparents first or whatever, that is your effort. You make that effort to extend it. But basically, when we are born as a child, it is about your survival. You're not aware and conscious of whatever else is around you. You learn all of that as you are growing. As a toddler, you go, now you can actually get up from the bed and move across the room. That is where your exploratory nature of our human self kicks in. But when you're first born, as a child, you cry because you're hungry, you cry because you're wet. It's about you. It's your
world.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So that is primal and basic to all of us at all times. What we have to do now, how you know that you're a bigger person, or you have grown in consciousness, or you're progressing as a human being, is when you are now subjugating that and extending the thought now to your environment or to the other person involved, or you're not just focusing on you and your survival.
Right. So, and I guess in a way, it's also when profound things like this happen, maybe we should try to look at it as a method of coping, of course, and catalyst to broaden our spirituality, broaden our perspective in the way we look at things and live our lives. Well, and
there are two sides to that, because I also look at it, I don't see it so much as that about me broadening my horizon. I see it that of all the members in my circle, family and friends, I am the one who could best deal with that. And my family and friends are experiencing it through me, because I am the one within this little world of friendship and family. I am the one that could handle it.
Right. What I was getting at was not so much you, because just knowing you and see how you handle everything, I think you were the best equipped to deal with such a circumstance. Yeah. But I'm saying for our listeners out there, maybe when profound things, it doesn't have to be something as dark as this, but just profound things in general, when something hits you like mind-blowing or just makes you really think, it's at that moment that you need to step into your higher spiritual self, however high it is at that moment, and just, look at things from more that angle versus the human, something is happening to me type of thing. Kind of like a catalyst for you to just look at things a little bit differently. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to change, but it might just be a little nudge from source, God, the universe.
Right, right. So that's what I was getting at with, you need to see what this has to do with you. Who are you in all of this playing out? Yeah, that's essentially it. Yes. Yeah. In order to deal with anything, you have to know yourself. People who just maybe follow the trends, they live very unfulfilled lives, and they get themselves in trouble.
Right.
And then you step back and wonder, how the hell did this happen? Because you aren't in touch with who you are. In life, you have to show up. Not who people think you are or who you are in your family, or you, the real you, has got to step forward.
Right.
And also, part of the zeroing in on who you are and even repairing your own mental health, one of the things I did was I relocated. And because I interpreted the dad's actions as an attempt to destroy me, his final attempt to destroy me, because as I said all along, there didn't seem to be any love, really. What I did was that I made up my mind that come hell or high water, I would not let this mean action of his, really unkind action, destroy me. That kind of strengthened my resolve. Every time sadness came up or thoughts that I thought would be destructive to me, I quickly found a way to brush it away. Like I may involve myself in an activity or something, go see friends or something, that I would totally shift the energy, because I really do believe it was an attempt to try and destroy me, and I couldn't afford for that to happen, because I know that I still had to go on.
And the other thing too, I guess, not for you per se, because when it happened, you weren't in a relationship, but for anybody that may be in a relationship or close enough to somebody that may be displaying things that just seem kind of off, maybe in distress or just acting in ways that seem kind of off, it may be time to just try to get that person help if they're open to it, or even just investigate a little further to see what's going on. I'm not saying in this case, because again, you weren't with him and you didn't even live in the same town or anything. Maybe little things were sprinkled, but not enough for you to really think that anything like this would ever happen. But it just goes to show that sometimes maybe people are in distress, maybe, drugs or whatever, just certain things are at play. Yes. But if something hits you as odd, it may be worth it to just delve in a little more, even if you don't really want to get involved with the person, but just maybe reach out to a loved one or facilitate some sort of inquiry or whatever. And the person or the parent listening, if you don't feel comfortable approaching it directly yourself, maybe reach out to a loved one or a friend or somebody that's closer to the person to really, do some investigation, because really it might save that person from doing something that they really in their right mind would not do.
The one caveat I would add to what you're saying is that this is where mindfulness comes in. We must always be mindful that we are not projecting, because we, with the state of our mind and our consciousness, may see something in a particular way because that's the only way we can see it. But we must be careful that because of how we see it, we are not projecting onto somebody else.
Right.
Because of what we see going on with them. This is difficult for people who maybe don't believe in a divine design or a God or whatever. Because in actuality, each of us come to be part of a whole. Let's say humans, right? All humanity have come to be part of one human family, right? However, how we show up and who we are individually is to be part of that tapestry, let's say, right? And we have a significant role. I mean, some of us might feel disenfranchised and we have been overlooked, but in reality, we play a significant role. And until we accept that, we can't actually show up in our best self. But because of the role that we come to play, for instance, there is a thing in the Bible where it says Mary pondered these things. She was watching her son living his life and she pondered these things. The idea being that it's not everything you are to be directly involved in until you are sure that that is the role you are to play. So, yes, if we see somebody look like they're going down the wrong path or they're leading to self-destruction, so yes, we reach out to them. But, I find that if we are not coming from a state of pure love and, that deeper spiritual quality of you have nothing invested in it yourself personally. It's not about you. It's about that person, that other entity that needs to be helped. Always help will come. if you can approach it from that standpoint. So it's important for you to be sure that you are not projecting what you think you see when in actuality it is something else, because that's the way God has designed it to be.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
if that makes
Yeah, it
sense.
does. Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. So hopefully our listeners will understand what you're saying in that regard. And I guess, however, people deal with, this type of adversity or similar types of adversity is, I guess, relative to their spiritual level or awakened level.
Yes, awareness.
So again, this talk that we're having, it may resonate with some people, it may not resonate with some people, but I just felt your situation, the way you have dealt with it, is quite unique in the sense that you're, very spiritual person. You've always been that way as long as I can remember. I feel it will definitely help people regardless, maybe just look at things differently than they would normally look at things. And I hope it gives people a certain level of comfort if they have gone through this sort of adversity. I'm just hoping something will resonate in a positive way.
It will. The fact that we're doing this, I mean, we're putting it out into the universe and it will serve a good purpose. So,
Yeah.
We have the best intention for it. So it will be good. And
So-
thank you for the opportunity. I know it took us a while to get to it.
Yes, this has been a long time coming, but it happened when it was supposed to happen.
Exactly.
And for the sake of our listeners, it's New Year's Eve 2024 into 2025. And I'm sure you've been hearing a little bit of fireworks going off in the background. They're getting started early. So just to let you know.
Here in Jamaica, we're still in the morning part of the day. And I'm sitting on a hill. You probably hear my wind chimes going.
I hear wind chimes and birds.
Yes, lush green hillside, looking out to sea. It's a beautiful day. And, the sun is shining, beautiful blue skies, some puffy white clouds. I mean, it's so joyous, so joyful. I hope that can be felt for whoever is listening.
Yeah, so Happy New Year to all the listeners, and thanks to Ganga, my lovely aunt, for finally taking the time out of her schedule to have this very deep conversation. And again, hopefully our listeners will find it comforting and enlightening and informative.
Let me say a joyful Happy New Year to my world family.
Amen to that. Thanks, Ganga.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.
If you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe to hear upcoming podcasts. And please share with family and friends. Thanks for listening.